An odor may as well be a smell. Others would even call it a scent. But again, you'll agree with me that that's the reason why there are those three words describing what you feel with your nose. Is it a smell? Is it a scent? Or is it an odor? The judge is certainly yourself with regard to what your whims and fancies are. So the conversation is going to take that form, where what you may consider a stain is in fact a design as we paint the mosaic over the democratization process and the development of our country. It is not in my duty this morning to make any remarks that speak towards the contribution of the substance of the conversation. Rather, my role and my brief is that of a moderator, which in essence is to deal with the form as opposed to deal with the substance. So if you're looking for substance, please look far away from my side. If you're looking for form, look towards my side. Form means ask me the questions such as, who speaks next? How long will they speak? Excuse me, Mr. Moderator, where are the gents or the ladies? Or can I have an extra cup of tea? Or maybe, where can I get an extra bottle of water? Anything more than that, I will be constrained to offer it in terms of the substance of our conversation. Why? Because they are more dignified persons with perhaps better insight into the subject matter than myself. That's it. I will get the ball rolling. The Right Honorable Speaker of Parliament, for my program, yours is to make a presentation. This presentation is supposed to set this discussion in the context in which we want it to be. Of course, we look forward to your guidance, your counsel, as well as your insights, after which, in our respective capacities, be we in civil society, in professional organizations, or even in the leadership of political parties, then we will get down to the real business of the conversation that is under the topic, the voice of the people, a reflection on the 10th Parliament.
Members, invited guests, people from civil society. I see my friends who are in charge of the governments in waiting. I can see President General Jimmy Akena, who also Member of Parliament for Lira municipality. I see the Honorable Nobert Mao, Chairman Mao, President General of the Democratic Party, former Chairman Gulu District, former Member of Parliament for Gulu municipality. Today we have the opportunity to give an assessment of a particular institution. It is called Parliament. But in giving that assessment, we've got to be mindful that we are part of the equation. Because Parliament is elected by people and works to promote the interests of the people. It is not easy to give an assessment of the 10th Parliament because Parliament is Parliament. This only happened to be a set that has been termed the 10th Parliament. There has been Parliament since this country was created. And Parliament is always Parliament. It has a history, it has a present, and it has a future. So that is what we're looking at. What is the place of Parliament and its members in shaping what should be in the interest of this country and its peoples? Parliament, the voice of the people, a reflection of the 10th Parliament. Or rather, many can say a reflection of Parliament of Uganda. Because the body of laws that we deal with, not just coming from the 10th Parliament, it is coming from the first Parliament. Some of them come from the British colonial government, but they still constitute the body of the laws of this country. What the 10th Parliament essentially does is to try and plug in the gaps that have been created or left open in the body and framework of laws of this country. What is the gap? So essentially the 10th Parliament coming in the middle or towards a country that has matured is basically to amend the existing framework of laws to improve on what has happened so far. They can do this by changing existing laws, repealing them, amending them, or introducing new laws, essentially creating an amendment of the body of laws that exists in this country called the laws of Uganda. In the year 2012, this parliament hosted the Interparliamentary Union. And the theme for that meeting was Parliament and the People, Bridging the Gap. That theme was not coined by Uganda. It was coined by the world community of parliamentarians. That in the play out of things over time, there seems to be a widening gap between people and parliaments. And that meeting specifically focused on that. How do we bridge the gap? Bridging the gap means building bridges. The question is, were those bridges there before, or are we building new bridges? Were those bridges there before and have been worn out by being non-responsive to issues of people? That makes this bridge almost dysfunctional. That now we are talking about building these bridges again. Parliament and the people, bridging the gap. A realization that has started revealing itself in the way the public responds to issues that come from Parliament. At that time, we posed some questions. Is it, do the laws we pass still facilitate the lives of people, or are we now just set on regulating lives of our people? Do laws facilitate? The new laws, do they facilitate? Or do they just regulate people's lives? The policies we pass, are they still responsive? Dealing with issues of human survival, facilitating growth and development of people, giving the environment where people can prosper. The policies we pass, do they still focus on those issues? Or are we more and more drawn to developing a state? Protecting a state. The budgets we pass as parliamentarians and parliaments, do they still respond to evolving the most productive sectors of our economies? Or are we just spending money to try and create situations that create a defense mechanism for an existing state that facilitates means of protecting the state? We ask these questions in an effort to say, okay, along the line, we could have had some missteps. How do we go back to basics? How do we go back and evolve and strengthen this relationship so that Parliament again, parliaments, not just the 10th Parliament of Uganda, but parliaments all over the world, because the trend is across the world. How would we make these changes? Because the responses are clear. People are resigned. When you have an election year and you're electing members of parliament, we know the percentage of the people who go to vote. When we're electing members of parliament, We know how many don't come back. I think the atrocity rate for the last elections were the most telling for this parliament. I think we got up to almost beyond 70% of members who didn't come back. Are they telling us something? Can we still, as parliaments and governments, pride ourselves as part of the statement by Uncle Abraham Lincoln that any government is for the people and should be by the people and of the people? Do we still say that? So as you do this assessment, ask yourself the question, have we been part of this? I see the Honorable Nobert Mao, who is now President General of a political party. He was once a member of parliament. Are we part of these situations that is slowly but steadily getting a lot, probably, let me not use that word. Gap is widening every other time. Collectively, therefore, civil society, political parties, how do we regroup? And put parliament in its place. I'm not going to talk about the existing member of parliament as individual parliamentarians. I'm talking about a system that these members find themselves in and must perform within what is existing. They are not excluded from the general society. They are part of the society. So when we do this assessment, start from yourself and see how you can make this parliament function better. Part of why this meeting has been called is to do exactly that. Part of why we created the Parliament Week every year for a week. We have a Parliament Week. Having close dialogue, meet your MP sessions. For 4, 5, 6 days, people come from the public and have engagement with the members of Parliament. That's how we have taken Parliament out of this building. We have sessions outside in our outreach programs. We've been to Karamoja, we have been to Arua, we have been to Kabarole. We try to move Parliament everywhere. And when out there we engage with the elected leaders in the districts and the local governments, we engage with the general population, and we have a face-to-face discussion on issues that get lost in translation. By the time they leave the people those issues. By the time they get to the table of Parliament, sometimes the people cannot recognize them. The people who initiated them can no longer recognize them when they're being discussed in Parliament. Time and again I've said, we spend in this Parliament, I happen to be a deputy speaker, I chair it once in a while. I wish somebody could get interested and gather for us the statistics of the discussions we have in this Parliament. But my own assessment is that over 80% of our time we discuss politics. And I can almost bet that even in this dialogue that we are going to have, over 90% is going to be politics. I see you laughing. When will Ugandans have an opportunity to discuss those things that really matter to our people? The economy, the state of the economy, and things like that. When people talk about wealth creation, what thinking is going into it? We just dismiss these things. Because we prefer the easy subject of politics, where it's easy to point finger. We are lazy thinkers. We don't want to think about things that will change our community. We prefer to discuss politics because anybody can discuss politics. It doesn't require any thinking. I can wake up in the middle of a dream and start discussing politics. But I cannot do that when I'm discussing things to do with how you change the trend the interest rate is taking in this country. I'll need to read some documents. I'll need to analyze some statistics. I need to consult some people before I open my mouth. But with politics, anything goes. I'm so sure, and I can see it written all over your faces. I see here the Honorable Mao laughing as a victim of what I am saying. Because that's exactly what is going to happen here. Sadly, we never have time to discuss important issues. We have a lot of time to discuss politics. And I'm hoping that this will be a different meeting where we're going to discuss how this parliament can change the structure of things in the economy, in social matters, infrastructure, the way the budget is structured. How do we influence this debate so that what comes out of parliament is not just the wish of President Museveni, the wish of the executive arm of government, but the wish, that wish as blended by the true wish and aspiration of the people of this country. I am looking forward to that debate. Really, I am. I am truly looking forward to that. But guess what? I know what you're going to discuss. Discuss it. We'll discuss it, but again, it will be an opportunity lost where we should start thinking creatively about the matters of this country and how we can put fresh ideas on how we change those things that matter most. So, these are just my initial thoughts. And I see from the arrangement of things that the boss is walking in. Please welcome the Right Honorable Speaker of Parliament, the Honorable Rebecca Kadaga, Speaker of Parliament. Madam Speaker, I had started. On asking this meeting not to be another failure. On asking this meeting so that we change our thought processes and we focus on those things that will really, truly change the lives of the people of this country, rather than spend 90% of the time discussing politics. And my suspicion was that it's written all over their faces. I can see God by there. That's all he's waiting for. That's the first word that will come from his mouth. But I was saying, I was hoping that today would be different. I'll thank God for that. I was hoping that this would be a different meeting. Madam Speaker, I told them that because this theme is very similar from the theme we discussed in the year 2012, IPU, Parliament and the people, bridging the gap. It was a realization by the whole world that there's a problem. There seems to be a growing distance between Parliament and people. And that meeting which you hosted implored governments and parliaments to start thinking on how this bridge could be narrowed and eventually this distance between people and parliament could be narrowed, and eventually we go back to basics. We go back to those declarations that parliaments and governments are for the people, by the people, and should be of the people. That's where I was, and I was just winding up. So you came at the right time, Madam Speaker. I don't know whether I finish. No, no, I was actually winding up when you came in, Madam Speaker. The other thing I said was that time we assessed what we do with our laws. Do our laws still respond to what can change lives of people, or are the laws we are passing now only aimed at regulating the lives of people? Same question about the policies of government. Do the policies we approve, are they still aimed at changing the lives of people, or are we focusing on sectors that are non-productive? The budgets we pass, what is the emphasis? Do they focus on energizing those sectors that will create more money for this country, or are we spending money just to buy things to defend the state? Those are the questions I was posing so that we can start thinking through these things properly and see how parliaments, being part of the society, constituted by members of the society, how it can be made more responsive to the wishes and aspirations of the people. That were my first thoughts, and thank you very much. God bless.
Distinguished members, I am not very convinced that that hand clap is befitting of these wonderful remarks. I in fact had the suspicion that you would even ululate, but looks like today is a day when you surprise all of us, like God did promise that he will surprise the Right Honorable Deputy Speaker by attending to more serious issues than politics. Now you'll agree with me that I, not being a politician, I, for my life, aspired to be on a table when very important things are being discussed, and I was convinced that the most important thing to discuss is politics. After all, someone said that politics is too serious a subject to be left politicians alone. And so when I looked around the room, I see laymen and laywomen like myself, and then I see quintessential politicians with incredible accolades to talk about, including, and of course not limited to, the speakers in their respective capacities, the chief whip of the government in power, distinguished leaders of the respective major political parties. I'm told we have over 38 political parties in this country, many of them in name. And that's the nature of how we have always discussed politics. But I think the Right Honorable Deputy Speaker makes an important observation that we ought to seriously think into and also help guide our conversation today. Importantly, I think we may need to thank Parliament for the idea of the Parliament Week every year, where, allow me to use the word, demystify the issue of Parliament and what Parliament denotes for a polity like Uganda. And I think they deserve a huge hand clap. The challenge perhaps is that we may need, when we say bring Parliament to the people, the Deputy Speaker has mentioned that they have had a rich outreach project that takes them to the nooks and corners of this country. Maybe like Oliver Twist, we may require them to be with us more than they actually are, being with us only once a year. But again, in this era of technology, we are with them all the time. After all, we watch proceedings live. We know what happens in the sacred chamber, which wasn't the case not long ago. And so finally, before I announce what is next on our program, the Deputy Speaker of Parliament alluded to that famous quotation from former American President Abraham Lincoln, when he described democracy as a government for the people, of the people, by the people.
I want to thank the Deputy Speaker for the opening remarks, because he informed you effectively about our mission as parliamentarians all over the world. that there was a visible lacuna and a disconnect between the population and the leaders. That's why we have since then engaged in many activities. The Uganda Parliament has been engaging in outreach activities where we leave Kampala and go to sit in particular places so that we can understand the issues which are relevant to that area. We have had meetings with the island constituencies because of their unique nature. We have had different meetings in the different parts of the country. We've also had the municipalities so that we can understand their issues, but mainly the districts. And I think one of our most successful outreaches was the last one in Arua, which we held before the Refugee Summit, and were able to engage with the leaders of West Nile. And that engagement enabled us to make an input in the Solidarity Summit, especially on the need for the United Nations to appreciate the role of Uganda in hosting refugees, but also to take up the role of addressing the infrastructure needs in the country. When we were in the West Nile, we found that the bulk of the roads were not made for the huge trucks that carry food aid. And the numbers alone had put pressure on the area. They finished our trees, etc. So we told the FAO representative, whom I had the pleasure to meet, that we would now want to see the United Nations support more infrastructure, not just bring tents and food, and then when the people are going away, the tents go and the food goes, but there's nothing left on the ground, and the local people have to work to revive their situation. So the outreaches are very important, but those were not enough. That's why we have this parliamentary week. This is the second, and I want to thank you because you were here last session. We are happy that you are back. Now, one of the things I found the Deputy Speaker talking about, and which I would want to touch upon, is our interaction. This man, Kasiate, he talked about the digital era, and I think it is true that not enough is being done to engage. We engage on insulting. That one is clear. We engage to insult our leaders. But you rarely see on the internet ideas proposing amendments to particular issues. The abuse is coming in big numbers. I think we'd want to see a situation where you say, okay, I've seen close this of the income tax bill. It might have this impact. Would you mind looking at it? For me, I think that would be a better engagement in the use of the digital era than what we are doing at the moment. But Parliament has worked on a lot of publications, and I would want to invite you to visit our stalls. Yesterday, I was shocked by the amount of work that has been done. Our ICT department has reconstructed the records of the LegCo. You know, during 1971, when there was a coup here, everything, all the hard copies were burnt. But the young people have reconstructed it, including the newspapers. I saw them yesterday. So something good is coming out of the digital age, and I want to invite you to visit our stalls so that you see what Parliament is doing. It's not just about shouting in the plenary or in the committees. A lot more is being done for this country. So we have provided information, training materials. I promise with the Honorable Olanya, we shall improve the website so that it's more interactive. We have tried hard to facilitate the access of the school children, the adults. Everybody is welcome here. We have many links and partnerships, and I want to thank that part of civil society which have supported us, especially on making some laws. I want to single out the especially gender-related civil society. They have been a bedrock for us in some of the legislation. They've been helping us on research. So we want to continue that engagement so that we work for the interest of the population. Civil society is important, because it's a very big social partner. It is the mirror of what we are doing and what we are saying. So it's important that we have views from different sides so that we are able to plan better. So I just want to say again, welcome, and have a good stay here. But before that, I wanted just to say that the Development Network of Indigenous Volunteer Associations, the NDIVA, which you know, conducted a survey in 2010 about the perception of the role of Parliament, civil society in government, and democracy. The findings indicated there was a need for public, civil society, and media to engage Parliament with a clear message. Uganda has an effective Parliament, which is able to independently monitor policy implementation, check the excesses of the executive, thus promoting good governance and democracy. One of the recommendations of that survey was the need to conduct an elaborate public awareness campaign on the functions of Parliament, duty of member of Parliament, and role of Parliament in governance and democracy. I must confess that that's an area where we have not quite succeeded in making the public understand the role of the member of Parliament, because we members here, you are the Bank of Uganda, you are the manager of funerals, you are the celebrant of all the graduations, you must sponsor the weddings and introductions, and also go and organize the funerals. If you are not there, the speaker doesn't, Tazika, and so on. So then, of course, because the president is too far from them, if the road is not done, they bash you. If there's no water, they bash you. The president is too far. You are the one they focus on. So when you say that you see me, I have been speaking, it's not enough for them. They want delivery, they want it now. They want the services here, they want the roads, they want the hospitals. So we still have a job to do to explain and make them understand how far a member of Parliament can go. But we are doing our bit. I hope that this meeting will help build that relationship and improve our areas of collaboration so that we don't just out there to shine. Because, you know, even civil society, they've got their sponsors. So they must be seen to be killing so that they get more money. If you're not seen really harassing, they think you're not working enough. So I think let us focus on what is good for the country so that we move together. Otherwise, again, welcome. I shall open this meeting, and I thank you very, very much for the honor to host you in the Uganda Parliament. Thank you very much.
That hand clap as a result of the last remarks, especially with regard to how we work to be seen, to harass us, to get more funding, I doubt. So let's give the Right Honourable Speaker more benefit. I think she has touched at the nerve of every one of us in regard to the perception we had of Parliament, even those of us who regard ourselves to be very sophisticated and knowledgeable. I'll give you a personal example, Right Honourable Speaker, before you exit. There is a terrible piece of infrastructure that in Kampala Capital City Authority is regarded as a road. I call it a cattle track. It leads to my house and it's named aptly as Robert Mugabe Road, somewhere in Mbuya. It is as old, as haggard as the person with whom it is named. I'm sorry if I'm sounding very undiplomatic. But strangely for me, I think KCC has become too far for me that I am often on the phone with the Honorable Mike Kawazigurka to ask him when this road will be macadamized, if for nothing else, to save on the traffic gridlock that we face around that area. Oftentimes, when there is a new factory within a residential neighborhood near where I live, I will call my member of Parliament to find out what he's doing about it. I know my colleagues who, when they have a social function, cannot proceed unless their member of Parliament has had an input. We are talking about this kind of input. I also know folks who I am sure if they were alive and able to make decisions at that particular time, they would not allow it to be buried unless their member of Parliament is there, not to make a speech, but to contribute, to buy the coffin and the rest. That, for many of us, is the role of a member of Parliament. The whole idea that they are coming to hug and discuss things we possibly don't understand in the chamber maybe is the least of our worries. And that's why I think it's important that this outreach is done. But you said you have a lot of material out there to read in your tent. Have you heard of this nasty joke that if you must hide something away from people like me, put it in a book? We won't see it. Question is, do we read? Do we take time to read? Or like she said, do we take time only to insult each other on radio programs like I am aware of, on TV shows like You Know I Know, and on social media platforms? And that should be the challenge that we carry on from here going forward. And finally, identifying that there has to be no gap between those that lead us and we the led. And I think she makes very incredible remarks. She sets the stage rolling, and indeed, she now guides how the discussion will proceed. Right, Honorable Speaker, I know you're hard pressed on time, you're exiting. Please proceed with your program. Now we are going to get down to the real business. You will be informed by your office.
It's such a great honor for me to be here with you this afternoon as you come to your parliament under the theme, Parliament, the voice of the people. It's always a great honor for us to be with the people who are close to the people. And when I came here, my mind was really thinking about interacting with the people who speak to the real people. I know even when we come here as legislators, as members of parliament, it is indeed true that when my brother over there was alluding to the fact that members of parliament from their constituencies to parliament, I think it takes again centuries for them to get closer to the real people. I said, yes, you're correct. The issue is that we really take long, and even if we went back, we may not really access the people just like you do access them. So I know that when I interact with the members of the civil society, when I interact with the leaders of the political organizations, then I know that I'm speaking to the representatives of the real people. I'm speaking to the real people, and therefore your voice should be considered as the voice from the people. I want to welcome you to Parliament, and specifically to the Parliamentary Week. Personal as Winnie Kiza, I hold the civil society in high esteem because I know that just like me, the leader of the opposition, my mandate is to hold the government accountable. And I know that in you, the civil society organizations, I have partners. Because together, we are supposed to keep government in check. So when I come here, I come to interact with the people that are so close to my heart. The people that I feel I should closely work with to ensure that governments, or the Republic of Ugandan government, delivers to the people to their satisfaction. And I'm also glad, Mr. Speaker, sir, that this parliamentary week has happened at a time when we are in the budget process. Many of the issues that you are talking about, I'm glad, are some of the questions that we are asking, even as we've discussed the budget framework paper. Indeed, the issues that are supposed to spur our growth as a country, and this afternoon I'm supposed to go and appear before the budget committee, Mr. Speaker, to talk about the same issues that you are talking about. I'm equally showing disappointments that the sectors which are supposed to engage all Ugandans are given minimal considerations in the budget as compared to the sectors that are well generally are supposed to cater for Ugandans. So your concerns are indeed our concerns, and your concerns are supposed to be our concerns because we represent you. If therefore we don't highlight your concerns, we would be debating about ourselves. The Speaker of the People's Parliament, if I am talking about the right thing, did allude to the fact that if we are to discuss constructively, we need to bring the person of President Museveni into the real context. It is indeed true. Have I addressed you properly, Mr. Speaker, sir? It is indeed true, but Simon kept referring to a particular discussion. Where can we come in with this discussion? I thought there was a national dialogue. And I thought this national dialogue would be the right forum where these questions must be answered. Mr. President, when do you intend to leave? And if you are to leave this country, how do you want to leave it? And if any citizen must take up from you, how do you want them to govern this country? The national dialogue provides this platform for these fundamental issues to be discussed. So my coming here once again is to impress it upon all of us Ugandans that we collectively link up with him and support the initiatives that are made through the national dialogue. And civil society actors, you are very key in this. Because the more we keep glued to one man, the more we disadvantage ourselves, and the more we frustrate growth, and therefore Uganda at large. We are all Ugandans. We believe in this country. We belong to it. We are here to stay and not to go anywhere. Governance issues have from time to time cropped up in this country. I remember, Mr. Speaker, when we were discussing the constitutional amendments, I will not hesitate to say many people came up with serious threats which you should not take for granted. People started mentioning here states that we had not known were in existence. People saying, you know, the emergence of this state is coming up. The emergence of this state is coming up. We should not take these questions and sentiments for granted. These are a precursor to a serious problem in our country, and therefore I appeal to you, members of the civil society, help us to address the governance issues. Let us understand them and be able to address them. We have always been helped and supported by you. You know very well that when we come here as members of parliament, there is no breeding ground. You still vote for us, even when you know that we don't have maybe the qualifications. The biggest qualification is that you must be of age from 18 and you must have completed senior 6. Some of the capabilities, I must admit, we don't have them, capabilities and competences. So we just come and start mingling through from nowhere. So some of us reach in the middle there and get lost. We need mentorship. It's very, very important if we are to follow these issues. So whoever mentors us first takes us where they want us to go. So if we are mentored by wrong mentors, you will see us discussing wrongly. Some of us are taken advantage of because of our situations. We know that, you know, this is my first appointment and I am here because maybe the president decided that I come here. And then you don't even take your own stand as a people's representative. You still think that you represent that individual who waved the card to you and possibly who facilitated you to come to parliament. So we need to also look for a forum where we shall begin mentoring young people to take up positions of leadership, so that by the time you identify someone as your representative at a level of member of parliament, you really know that you have brought in a solid representative who will withstand all pressures, who will withstand all storms, but otherwise we shall all keep lamenting and your members of parliament will keep representing you here in the reverse order. But otherwise, we shall forever represent the people. Sometimes I know we represent you negatively, but we remain your representatives. When we represent you fairly, we also need to be appreciated. Kasiata, I know I am taking more of the 2 minutes that you gave me, but I want to appreciate this opportunity for me to interact with the members of the civil society, and I can still pledge that we shall ensure that the resolutions from this meeting really are debated by Parliament. And that has always been the commitment that Parliament has been making during the parliamentary week. We debate and make resolutions as Parliament. As to whether those recommendations and resolutions have been implemented, it's a different arm. However, it is again up to us to ensure that we do the follow-ups, you and us, for purposes of holding government accountable. I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the parliamentary week. And as you may be aware, this is in response to the IPU meeting that was held here, and they resolved that Parliament should be more accessible to the citizens of this country. Uganda is now holding the second parliamentary week, and we believe that maybe year in, year out, we shall continue doing it better than we have done it so far. We believe that we shall look for a way of tracing and tracking the resolutions that will be coming from the civil society parliament and the People's Parliament that we are anticipating on Thursday. I can personally pledge that I will follow up the resolutions that will come from this meeting. Because like I have said before, civil society, you hold governments accountable. And that is basically the mandate of the Office of the Leader of Opposition, to ensure that government is kept in check. Government fulfills the undertakings they make to the population. Government ensures that services are delivered to the people in a proper manner. Together, we shall make sure that that is achieved. I want to thank you for God and my country.
Dr. Margaret Sekajan. And for the right reasons.
In civil society, I still interact with Parliament, especially the Human Rights Committee of Parliament. So I know the challenges, where we need to go, and what we need to do. However, our theme today is the voice of the people, a reflection of the 10th Parliament. And if we say that, I think it's mainly to say, what is the role of Parliament? Parliament, the primary responsibility is to safeguard the Constitution. The Constitution is the idea that government can and should be limited in its powers by a fundamental law or a set of laws beyond the reach of an individual government to amend them, whose authority depends on its observing of these limitations. The executive is charged with a duty to implement laws under the Constitution. But Parliament has the duty to protect the Constitution and promote democratic governance. So before we go through all the other duties, the overall responsibility of Parliament is to safeguard the Constitution. Parliament is charged with passing laws that provide for good governance and playing the oversight role of the other arms of government. Parliament is therefore charged with protecting the Constitution and holding the government accountable. The Constitution should not be easily and frequently amended, to suit the needs of the government of the day. And this is what the principal duty of protecting the Constitution is or is about. Hold the executive accountable is that it's difficult for the state to abuse the power that is given by the law. The executive explains to Parliament the state actions or lack thereof. Therefore, if we take the prime responsibility of Parliament to safeguard the Constitution, we know that it's going to do all its duty to fight for observance of the Constitution. The other responsibility of the Parliament is observance of rule of law. The legislative function is there. They pass the laws, but they must also ensure that they observe the rule of law. In this country, we know the challenges which we are going through, but Parliament must be there as an oversight institution. The responsiveness of the needs of the area, it must know the expenditure of funds which are available in the country. It has to know the equitable distribution of resources. It must have access to information and feedback from the government. All these are for parliamentary intervention. So, Parliament has the role of legislating, representing the people's views, and oversight. The Speaker gave you a synopsis of the report by Deneva, and I picked this up also. The perception which was given by Deneva of the 8th Parliament was as follows. Parliament rotates around providing social services, helps to chase poverty, help people to, in time of need, to meet their social needs. Is that what the 10th Parliament is doing? Or has there been a change from the 8th and 9th Parliament? Are they still going around to meet people's social needs? I think that's our entry point. How do we get our people to understand the role of Parliament other than chasing their social needs? Professor Muhumuza William, Department of Political Science and Public Administration, Makerere University, gave a synopsis of what Parliament should do. That Parliament should represent the interests of the people. It should check the excesses of the executive. It should debate issues of national interest. It should ensure accountability of all government departments. It must ensure national resources are put to good use, supervising the bureaucrats. It should ensure that policies are pro-people. In my view, in addition to what Professor Muhumuza propounded on, and in my capacity for all the years which I've been in this country, I think the role of Parliament in the protection and promotion of human rights is very, very important. When it comes to promotion and protection of human rights, Parliament is an essential actor. Parliament is a guardian of human rights because the country's peace, social harmony, and steady development depends to the extent to which it permeates human rights in all parliamentary activities. It should have the capacity to reflect faithfully the diversity of all components of society. Here, when we talk about the society in Uganda, Parliament engages with everyone. You know, sometimes when we talk about Parliament reflecting the voices of the people, we are thinking about just the ordinary people. The voices of the people are the farmers, the teachers, the doctors, the civil society, religious leaders, cultural leaders. All those people are your constituents as members of Parliament. Irrespective of ethnic groups, you have to take those into account. You have to take into account the different political opinions. Parliament can fulfill its role if the members enjoy freedom of expression necessary in order to be able to speak on behalf of their constituents without fear or reprisal. They, as you know, enjoy parliamentary immunity. Does that happen with the 10th Parliament? Do they enjoy the freedom of expression, whether within and outside Parliament? We still see the inter-party politics, where their parties are dismissing them for having said this, or they are disciplining them for saying that. We need freedom of expression for the members of Parliament to be able to propound on issues which affect their constituents. They should be protected against any threats, intimidation, or arbitrary measures directed against public officials or other citizens. I want to quote from the Interparliamentary Council. They say this: the protection of the right of parliamentarians is a necessary prerequisite to enable them to protect and promote human rights in their respective countries. The representative nature of a parliament closely depends on the respect of the rights of members of Parliament. They must understand the Constitution and the state's human rights obligations, the functioning of government and public administration, and parliamentary procedures. Members of Parliament must have sufficient resources and technical knowledge. So we need a Parliament, if it's going to represent the people, to have both the resources and the knowledge. And if they don't have this, I will proceed to tell you they might not be effective. One of the things which they need to do, which will need technical knowledge, is ratifying human rights treaties. Check whether government has ratified the treaties, because the other people outside it might not know that the role of Parliament is also to ratify human rights treaties or other treaties. They have to check whether government has ratified the treaties. So they need the technical know-how. They have to adapt the budget and sufficient funds provided for the different activities. So they need the technical knowledge to know if you adapt the budget, how is it distributed? Is it distributed equitably? Therefore, they put questions to ministers, fact-finding or investigations, committees or commissions in doing that.
5 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
As a follow-up on the recommendations by the UN, they have to follow up recommendations by the UN, by regional bodies, fulfill reporting obligations. As I've worked with the Parliament, we've worked with the Human Rights Committee on developing the human rights checklist, but I think they also need to ensure that this checklist is applied. Is the human rights checklist checking all the laws which are applied or which are passed by Parliament? They must make sure that national institutions are strengthened, that the recommendations they make are adequately implemented. We need also the national human rights action plans to establish human rights parameters. I think, Honorable Speaker, the Deputy Speaker, the Human Rights National Action Plan is not yet launched, but we need it. Follow up on agreements. That's where the Parliament will play a big role. On follow up on WTO agreements. These help the people, the ordinary people, intellectual property rights, the trade agreements, the agricultural agreements, which are actually affecting our ordinary people on how they do their business on everyday life. In conclusion, I want to say, what have we done, we as civil society? We've helped Parliament to analyze laws. We've helped Parliament and trained their members so that they should have the technical knowledge, they could understand the issues. We have produced materials for Parliament to be able to fulfill on their role. Civil society has done a lot to complement what Parliament does. And as the Deputy Speaker said, we should be taken as partners in this whole struggle. We are all people of Uganda, as you said, and we are part of it. We should not be out of it. We should be in it and contribute to a successful Parliament. Therefore, some of those issues which I've mentioned, I might not have exhausted everything. Definitely, service delivery is one of those most important things which has to be monitored. But if you monitor the budget, you monitor service delivery, you get down to what people need, equitable distribution of resources. I thank you very much.
Madam Dr. Margaret Sekaja, thank you very much for indeed setting the stage right and dictating the mood in which we'll be speaking. I think you've heard her. She underscores the need for Parliament, like the Deputy Speaker of Parliament did tell us, to discuss more serious stuff than politics. But as she spoke, I couldn't help but ask myself, when she talks about discussing WTO, EPAs, intellectual properties, the Deputy Speaker of Parliament said we need to discuss the system or environment in which our MPs operate and survive and thrive. He also said that they are not cut from a different society. They come from all of us. Are we as sophisticated a people to discuss these things in our own default setting or even attend to them when they're discussing them? If there was a news item on the television and the debate was about the economic partnership agreements. But on another channel, there is a bit of drama with regard to a fist fight, as it were, in the chamber. Where would you keep your dial as someone that has got a choice in your hand with a remote? Would you rather go to discuss and listen to a deep conversation, or you want to see the run-of-the-mill dramatization? But also, when we as a people, sophisticated enough, or so we think, to discuss these issues, shun away from offering ourselves to elective politics. Maybe allow others, not quite sophisticated, to participate. And yet we demand of them the same sophistication that we have, yet we shy away. Are we serving the purpose for which Parliament was set in place? I'm still thinking, and I hope that by the end of today I'll find answers more than the questions I'm asking myself. From the soothing words of Dr. Margaret Sekaja, take us down the hill of intellect and take our minds even further. I hope you appreciate that you need to speak to us in a language that we will all understand, so that we can score distinctions if we are asked what you said. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon, the Right Honorable Deputy Speaker, and distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I'm not sure I'm going to appoint the Speaker, but I'm a student of political science and public administration. That's what I teach. That's what I research on. That's what I consult on. For those of us who are Christians, we have all sinned and fallen short of God's glory. So you can imagine we are talking about an assembly of sinners who are politicians. So, but I'll end that there. One of the traditional roles of politicians is to express the will of the people. And in order for them to express that will, they must define it, they must promote it, and they must protect it. Then they express it. So the roles we have been reminded earlier, oversight, representation, and so on, is primarily about expressing the will of these people, or the voice of the people. So the deeper question for us here is, what is this voice? Where is this voice? Let's look at a member of parliament. He represents a constituency with multiple voices. So these voices have to be aggregated, or they have to be put together. And where it is a question of yes or no, either or, then the member of parliament is expected to express the dominant voice. Because sometimes the voice can be clear and questionable, but sometimes it can be mixed voices. And it's the same in terms of voting. Some people can vote because they think like you, or they don't think like you, but they think you're the best representative. Let's bring this home. One way of aggregating interests is through political parties. We are privileged to have a number of political parties here and their leaders. They have policy agendas. They have what some people may call philosophy or ideology, or a number of ideas that bind them together. And they are used as vehicles to come to parliament. But when members of parliament come to this house, whom do they represent? Which voice takes precedence? Is it the voice of the constituency, or the voice of the party. Some of us are persuaded that it is the voice of the constituency that takes precedence because you are representing the constituency, though you use the party as a vehicle. So it's your duty to ensure that the constituency and the party have a point of convergence. And where they differ, people will differ on which positions they would take. You follow your conscience, but some of us suggest that that's what the constituency says. But again, a number of mechanisms are in place to capture this voice. Members of parliament go for consultations, surveys are carried out, but we do not seem to know which criteria is considered as the minimum expected standard of saying, this is what my constituency has said. Is it an opinion poll conducted by an independent researcher? Is it an opinion poll conducted by the research department of parliament? Or by the civil society? I use the word opinion poll because surveys are one way in which you can aggregate these interests. Of course, the most obvious one and clear one is a referendum. People vote and it's very clear what the constituency is saying. So how do you manage this diversity of opinion, and when you're on the floor, you authoritatively claim that what I'm saying is the voice of the people? Mr. Speaker, I would suggest that then we need to strengthen the research department of Parliament, and it's so that it can conduct some surveys, or Parliament itself can come out with what it considers a consultation policy. This country has no policy on how to consult, but other countries have policies on how you can consult. We have some few guidelines, but maybe we may consider on having a consultation policy. I'm aware that a number of technical reports and research on non-political questions have been actually largely taken up by Parliament. Issues of human rights, issues of budget, issues of gender and equity, and so on. It may be helpful to give the same credence to political answers or questions or researches. There seems to be less tolerance of views that answer or question political issues than there is for non-political issues. Reference is to, for example, the civil society opinion poll on the age limit, or the earlier presentations on the reforms, electoral reforms. The other observation that I would like to make is the linkage between members of parliament and the districts. We all know that members of parliament are ex-officio members of the district legislatures. To what extent are our members of parliament allowed by you, Speaker, or present to you what they have found out specifically from their parliaments back home? Because I would think that if we strengthened the linkage between the lower level legislatures and our national legislature, maybe it would increase on this question of expanding the space for listening to the voice of the people. We are glad that you have outreach programs and you do a lot of consultation with local elected leaders. You find them there, and we have also seen them come to you, bring memoranda and so forth. but we could increase that interaction in a more structured way. The other observation that I would like to make is the preoccupation that we have for majoritarian democracy, where numbers are considered a superior form of resolving a matter of contention. I'm aware that you also practice consensual democracy, but we seem to be more preoccupied with settling disturbing questions, more with numbers and less with persuasion and putting people on board. So we deny the possibility
5 minutes.
of increasing the force of the better argument. Lastly, being a multi-party democracy, we have a problem where we can fall into, this is what Simon never wanted me to go into, the iron law of the oligarchy. This is the idea that as parties become strong, as parties become more organized, very few people will be dominant and they will determine what happens. And recently one of the leaders in one of the parties mentioned that decisions are taken by very few people. And exactly that's what happened. Very many people don't take decisions because information, decision-making processes, power tend to go to those who are specialized and having particular positions of influence. So that iron law of the oligarchy undermines multi-party democracy. In conclusion, it's good we have representative democracy, and there is need to move towards increasing participative democracy. Opportunities like these and many others, the question is, how do we increase participation, and how do we recognize or trace the meeting you had in your constituency and claim that this law, this amendment, this debate was informed partly by that voice of the people. There is no way we can avoid evidence-informed decision, parliamentary debates, and some of these are the opportunities that lay ahead. One, the civil society is helpful in terms of diagnosing the problem and providing some of the options. It is also helpful in monitoring on the ground. And a lot has been said about our parliament. I may not make a judgment, but I can say that it is a vibrant parliament. It has shown that it can speak truth to power. We have seen it negotiate its independence, but at the same time, many times the population feels that its voice gets lost in what the speaker called translations, but I think it gets lost in politicking. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Professor Gerard Kareja, thank you very much for that insight that you just shared. Now, distinguished members, Right Honorable Speaker of Parliament, in this audience, we have a delegation from the Zambian Parliament. May I, without further ado, request that, led by your clerk, Madam Cecilia, wave to us so that we can acknowledge your presence. When you return to Lusaka, I'm sure you are aware of a cabinet minister named Brian Mushimba. Brian Mushimba worked for many years as a technical director in ESCOM Uganda, where I also worked, But Right Honorable Speaker, is just to inform you that this country continues to nurture incredible leaders across the African continent, and the minister in Zambia was only at ESCOM a few years ago when I was there, and is now an incredible leader. I suspect he also wants to become president soon. Thank you very much for joining us. And as you can see, here in Uganda, we are proud to engage each other, have these conversations. Not that you don't, but I think this is a spirit that ought to be, emulated and also transplanted in the various places that we are.
To what extent is this parliament a voice of the people? And that's where I will start. And in starting, let me quote from the Fountain of Honor himself. While in a campaign for a by-election in Ruhama, this is what he said, and I open quote: "Parliament is a bus park where everyone comes simply to talk, but actual service delivery and allocation of resources do not take place there." Close quote.
Say that again, we may have missed it.
That Parliament is a bus park. I left out something where people make noise. It says a bus park where everyone comes simply to talk, but actual service delivery and allocation of resources do not take place there. And I'm one of those people who take the speeches of President Museveni very seriously. And I read them, and he's always serious. Maybe my brother, Honorable Nobert Mao, does not take his words seriously sometimes, but I do. And in opening, let me say this: why would such an important constitutional body that has the powers under the Constitution be described in those terms? That is the question for us to discuss. Why? Why? Because one of my favorite authors, Simon Sinek, always has written a book about the why. And he says, in everything you do and think about, always ask why. And in asking why Parliament is described in those terms, I would raise a few issues. And I've been pondering since this was said, what exactly do we take home from this? And I'll raise issues because lawyers will predominantly raise issues. Since this is a discussion, we can resolve the issues together because I don't have all the answers. The first issue is, could it be that despite the vast powers, even very clear powers in the Constitution about appropriation of resources being a mandate of Parliament, Parliament has negated on this responsibility? Could it be that instead of designing and framing the budgetary process under the Public Finance Management Act, we have left out core functions like the Deputy Speaker has ably stated, the function to facilitate the economic well-being and development of this country, to make this country work for everyone? Could it be that Parliament has negated that very, very solid constitutional function provided for by the supreme law of the land? Secondly, could it be that despite the vast powers, like Dr. Sekaja has enumerated, of oversight, Parliament has left many oversight bodies with their reports unattended to. Recently, the IGG was complaining that her reports are not attended to. Human Rights Commission. Could it be that that voice of oversight is being lost in this parliament? Could that be the reason where this parliament is being termed in those terms? Thirdly, could it be that parliament, in the broad sense of the word, as Gerald has described, with a mandate to the constituency and the country, they have ceded their voices to a caucus? Could that be the reason? That whatever happens in the caucus is interpreted as being done for and in the name of the national interest of the Republic of Uganda? Could it be that that is what is happening? Thirdly, could it be that Parliament, even when in its mission statement it has made it clear that they would like to achieve improved accountability, representative, constitutional democracy, and rule of law, have been quiet when we have seen cases of rising impunity in this country? Could it be that the tears of the people in Kasese have been subverted and the national parliament has not found its voice to resolve this matter with finality and to hold people who are responsible for the loss of lives to account? Could that be the case? Could it be the case that we have even failed to simply put the security organs to account? That today we have a police that is most effective when dealing with political cases and most ineffective when the citizens of this country want their presence in dealing with criminality around their homesteads? Could that be the case? And that no one is held to account, and no minister has been censored, with rising cases, women murdered, and the police and people have the boldness and the courage to come to this parliament and associate themselves with criminals and still continue to lead a public office. Could that be the case? That the voice of parliament in bringing law and order and ensuring that no man is above the law is being drowned in these issues? Could that be the case? Could it be the case that this parliament has not attended to the issues of electoral justice and resolved them with finality? Mr. Speaker, you recall that in 2001 you chaired a committee to investigate on matters of elections from that issue of 2001. And we all recall that the Supreme Court in 2001 did find that there were problems with that elections, 2006 and as well 2017, and Parliament and made 10 recommendations for the Attorney General and the government to attend to. What does Parliament pick? Parliament picked only 2 minor of the 8 provisions in form of the Magezi Bill, and only dealt with issues of extension of time after petition has been annulled. But also, could it be that prior to that, in resolving issues of election justice, the only amendment brought before 2016 was to change the name of the Electoral Commission from Electoral Commission to Independent Electoral Commission, whilst the substance was nil? What about the key things that the Supreme Court has found? The participation of the executive and civil servants, allocation of resources during the campaigns to tilt that, the appointment of the Electoral Commission, and all that. Could it be that the voice of this parliament in creating an enabling framework to conduct elections is being drowned and being lost in politics. Mr. Speaker, there's certainly politics, good politics and bad politics. But politics is what drives everything. So, those are issues, and I would like to say, in answering all these things, let us remember the words of William Wilberforce. And he said, no matter how loud you shout, you can never drown out the voice of the people. There will be a time when, and it is happening, there are symptoms we are seeing. These things we are ignoring, like Republic of Kawempe, they have a nuisance value now, but they're a statement of where this country is going. And if the institutions, constitutional institutions, don't address injustices that we have enumerated and make this country work for everyone, Mr. Speaker, this voice will drown, and God forbid, we should never arrive at a place where in a certain country, people burnt the parliament because it was no longer helpful to them. So in closing, let me say this. Parliament has a very loud voice in the Constitution. And Parliament must reclaim that voice to serve the citizenry. And if they do that, and they still have the time, and we are willing to work together with Parliament, because this is the only Parliament we have. In fact, when I got the invitation, I was in light of our recent issues with, I thought maybe not. But again, I remembered that this is the only institution called Parliament that Uganda has. And I'll be abdicating duty not to appear to have a discussion. So I think it is important we continue conversing, because ultimately, when we will to make this country work for us, it will work for us. For us as a law society, we will continue to engage through our clusters. We will engage Parliament. And Mr. Speaker, you know, we have proposed, because we have noted the delay, again, the voice of lawmaking. We have also noted that continuously the executive is not bringing bills in time, so Parliament does not have sufficient business from the executive. So we have said, okay, as lawyers, we can draft the laws, we can look at the policies. So we're engaging Parliament. We are so far sponsoring 2 bills, the trustee bill and the competition bills. We are following up closely on the administration of the judiciary bill and the legal aid bill. We think that on our part, these are some of the things we can do to make Parliament find its voice of lawmaking in the interest of peace, development, and good governance of the country, and oversight as well. As we do this, we hope that we will protect this noble institution and make it serve all of us for the good of the country. Thank you so much.
You will agree with me, Right Honorable Speaker, that the President of the Law Society has not disappointed. Perhaps I may be looking at it from a different perspective, but I must thank you, Mr. Francis Gimara, for that. You left many questions for us to ponder about on the floor, and I want to believe that when the floor finally opens for remarks to come in from the audience, then we will get a bit of an insight.
Right Honorable Deputy Speaker, colleagues on the panel, political leaders, ladies and gentlemen. I am really honored and humbled to be speaking at this moment when all my colleagues have spoken. I also learned that I share quite a bit of stuff with Francis, because I'm also an ardent reader of the President's speeches since 1986. I have filed every speech and read each one of them because they are interesting, not only in terms of the content, but also the contradictions. I find them quite interesting. And that is where I will start. That About 2 weeks ago, I received the official invitation to this event to come and interact with Parliament. And you know, the fact that this is a theme where we talk about Parliament as the voice of the people. I therefore really want to congratulate the Parliament administration, the Speaker and the Deputy, you know, for creating this forum, this platform, where we can have this interaction. But I must confess that when I received the invitation, I received it with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Excitement because it is often, it's not often that you get an opportunity to speak to your members of Parliament in a formal setting of this nature. I realized that actually my expectation was that we would be having members of Parliament here, not just the Parliament leadership. So I thought we would be engaging in a much more, you know, diverse conversation with various members of Parliament. I therefore view this invitation as my rare opportunity to speak directly to the Parliament and speak deep from the bottom of my heart about the space of Parliament as an institution in my life and the life of many Ugandans. And I must confess that I agree with the Deputy Speaker that we cannot talk here about the 10th Parliament. We can only talk about the Parliament as an institution, because that's what it is. The voice of the voiceless, we are here, so we want to see Parliament as the voice of the voiceless men who work our nation's mines and spend days in grazing lands looking after cattle and goats and sheep, and those who spend the nights on treacherous waters on our lakes earning a living. Think about the voiceless women who farm the home gardens and keep our homes and look after the sick and do petty trade on the streets of our capital and the towns across this beautiful country. Think about the voiceless teachers who spent countless hours in our classrooms shaping the future of our children, and that way shaping the future and the destiny of this great nation. The voiceless doctors and nurses and midwives who work day and night to save lives. The thousands of our students that study on the margins of our education system, and the young men and women, educated and uneducated, who walk the streets of our cities looking for jobs and an opportunity to earn a living. And of course, the voiceless millions of children that join our school system and disappear before they complete primary 7. So when this theme was relayed to me about Parliament as the voice of the people, that's basically what was running in my mind. And I would want to challenge the Speaker, because when she spoke here, she talked about the digitization of the archives. That speaks to me. As a researcher, I make some money when you digitize that information and I can access it. But these voices here, they probably will never know that there is a digital system where you can easily access the archives. But how do we reflect their aspirations in our work as Parliament? But the excitement was actually overcome by anxiety as I reflected on the theme of our discussion today and what has become of the Parliament of Uganda and consequently the 10th Parliament. As I framed the title of my discussion today, I reflected on the proposed theme of the debate, the voice of the people, a reflection on the 10th Parliament. I wondered whether the voice of the people was a statement of fact, a rhetorical question, or better still, a question that needed to provide answers. And I was intrigued that actually Francis gave us more rhetorical questions. Normally when you give rhetorical questions, it's like things are complicated, things are hard. So you want everybody to be part of the answering. So 3 days ago, as I plowed into the daily monitor while doing my routine research, which I do for a living, I came across a quotation by President Museveni while addressing the people of Ruhama, which Francis has just shared with us. So we are following almost the same speeches. And I will repeat for emphasis that the President says, Parliament is just like a place for all to talk. It's like a bus park but real things are located somewhere else. If you look at an independent, that's the president saying, he will never reach me. So I hit my Google browser looking for statements of denial by the president's handlers. There was none. I looked for statements of outrage. There was none, even in Parliament, or even from Parliament. I kept wondering how the president, the fountain of honor, would refer to the Parliament of Uganda, the voice of the people, as a bus park, and it passes as if it was something normal from all of us. I then came across another Daily Monitor story of January 11, 2018, headlined, "Respect Parliament, Olanya tells executive." The Daily Monitor quotes Deputy Speaker Jacob Olanya as telling the executive, and I quote, "Respect this institution. We cannot sit here, spend people's time taking decisions that are simply ignored. It is not only bad politics, it is also bad manners." And that's exactly what I felt when I read the person holding the title of the Fountain of Honor calling the Parliament, comprised of what is supposed to be our representatives, a bus park. Bad politics and bad manners. And we have to live with this and figure out how do we deal with this. And we have to depend on the leadership of Parliament to be able to challenge those kinds of actions. So what President Museveni and Deputy Speaker Olanya and the MPs who contributed to the debate on Tuesday, January 9, is almost what happens at a typical Uganda bus park. Because you see, there are bus parks and then there is Uganda bus park. Because if you have traveled and you have been to bus terminals, you know how organized the bus park is. So when we talk about Parliament of Uganda as a bus park, you have to also understand the nature of the bus park. So at the Uganda bus park, park managers, bus owners, bus touts, passengers, etc., all make different decisions that can either be implemented or ignored with valid consequences. It is on the basis of what Mr. Museveni and Deputy Speaker said that I chose to title my talk today, "From the Voice of the People to a Bus Park." So that's the topic of my talk. Because what the Constitution provides is supposed to be the voice of the people. But what we are seeing is that shift from what it is supposed to be to what it is now, and therefore how do we then reclaim that institution to be what it ought to be? To give credit, I can point some instances when Parliament reflected the will of the people and it made us proud. I can reflect when Parliament demanded for accelerated legislation on petroleum, on petroleum. I think that was phenomenal. And we saw Parliament put its feet down and say, government, you have a responsibility to do this, and the government complied. We can reflect on when Parliament demanded for accountability for the death of the late Catherine Nebanda, RIP. That was a fight. That's what people's representatives are supposed to do. We can reflect on when Parliament demanded that the health sector budget be increased to enable recruitment of midwives, or when Parliament voted to inquire into the 6 billion presidential handshake, and a reported recommendation that almost has now been ignored. Right Honorable Deputy Speaker, I want to implore you that let Parliament not forget that Ugandan taxpayers spent money to be able to get that inquiry done, and therefore look at the recommendation, and then the people of Uganda will say, yes, we have a voice. But we can also reflect when Parliament attempted to demand accountability on Chibok Squad and Border 2010. It was responding to the outcry of the people of Kampala, but because it could not demand for the disbanding of these groups, then that qualifies it to be a bus park, because people have suffered because of these militia groups until someone says, now I need to demobilize them. As I move to my conclusion, I want to basically highlight a number of areas where I think Parliament needs to be assertive, to be focused, to be able to be the voice of the people that it should be. If we take the traditional roles of Parliament, representation, oversight, legislation, budget appropriation, we can look at a number of areas where Parliament can purposefully do its work, and the people of Uganda were then proud of that Parliament. On service delivery, for example, that's one area where everybody recognizes that there is a breakdown in service delivery, including members of Parliament. But when citizens demand for improved public service delivery, Parliament has basically conspired with the executive and the local political elite to create new districts, upgrade makeshift towns into municipalities, and make trading centers into boards and town councils. What does this give us? When we are looking for doctors and nurses and midwives and teachers, Parliament gives us more MPs, more chairpersons 0C5, more district councillors, more RDCs, more DSOs, more district police commanders. And I know that members of Parliament know that Ugandan citizens are not looking for these kinds of people. Because if you have a failing education system, you don't produce RDCs, you produce school inspectors. It's simple logic. So I think that on the question of service delivery, Parliament has a lot to do to deserve the respect of the people. I should mention that every year, we see the Minister of Primary Education announcing PROE results, and then we celebrate the success of some 600 pupils who completed primary 7. But we forget that over 1 million students, or over 1 million pupils, never complete primary 7. It's outrageous that Parliament does not call the Minister for Primary Education to come and answer, where did the 1 million plus children disappear to? Or was it fiction? If they exist, then we need to hold ourselves accountable. On the economy, I think that we can do much better by changing the economic philosophy of this government from welfareism, tax relief, and what I call administrative engineering. For the sake of time, I won't explain some of these concepts.
You have 5 minutes.
Yes. But basically, the idea that you can do trickle-down economics, that by investing at the top, you are addressing the bottom, is a philosophy that has failed almost everywhere. But government has pursued this kind of economic philosophy for the last 3 decades. And what we are seeing, poverty levels stagnating, and most recently, going up, low levels of per capita GDP across all the districts. I think that Parliament can be able to address this by basically demanding that the government present a much more robust plan on how you deal with these issues. On safeguarding democracy, Right Honorable Speaker, even when we the citizens went and engaged in consultations on electoral reforms, and I remember before the reforms in before the 2016 elections, we came and met with you in the office. We presented the Citizens Compact on electoral reforms, and then Parliament asked its Legal and Parliamentary Affairs Committee to go around the country and collect views of the citizens. And then the committee came back after spending money, and the Parliament said, we don't have time to incorporate the proposals of the citizens. I think that it's very frustrating to feel like the Parliament, the people's representative, actually conduct business that way. So my last point is about what I would call the tunnel without light at the end. Is Parliament the tunnel without light at the end? Why am I saying this? That in the Constitution creates and reaffirms the 3 arms of the state: the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. Of all the 3 institutions, it is only the Parliament which is commanded to protect the Constitution. The executive is for executing. The judiciary is for adjudicating. It is only Parliament which has a mandate to protect the Constitution. So it is unimaginable, Right Honorable Speaker, that the same members of Parliament who swore to protect the Constitution are the same ones who produce bills to change the Constitution. What exactly were they swearing to protect? You would imagine that the logical thing to do is that amendment, the proposals for amendment, are coming from the executive. But here we had a case where the member of Parliament is the one who basically produces a bill and says, I want to change the things that I sought to protect. And I can assure you that the actions of Parliament in changing the age limit and changing the terms of your contract from 5 to 7 years has done sufficient damage. Right Honorable Speaker, I think you just have to invest, I don't know what kind of PR machinery to be able to, recapture the imagination of the population in as far as the reputation of the Parliament is concerned, but also in terms of citizens looking at the Parliament as a voice. Let me end by sharing my 2 quick points. One is about that every amendment that the Parliament has made since the 6th Parliament has been to tear down the safeguards that are built in the Constitution. I would want someone to point me to an amendment of the Constitution that strengthens the safeguard. A year before the first anniversary of the Constitution, in July of 1996, Parliament voted to change the number of cabinet ministers. That was the first amendment to the Constitution. You can call it anything, but I think it was an amendment. The 7th Parliament voted to remove age limit. The 10th Parliament, the 7th Parliament voted to remove term limits. The 10th Parliament voted to remove age limit and extend the tenure of Parliament, the President, and the local councils. I think that each of those amendments basically weakens the constitutional framework and makes Parliament what the President is saying it is. And I think that's what we need to change. My 3 quick recommendations. One is, I can bet that this Parliament will not change its character, and the perceptions about it will not change unless you change its size. That if you cannot reduce the size of the Parliament, I can tell you we are going to remain with this kumbaya. And unfortunately, probably changing it is a political question, because all the issues that we are dealing with, even in terms of the quality of the Parliament, are political issues. As a policy analyst, I was taught and I have learned never to apply the wrong solutions to the wrong problem. If you have a political problem, Simon, you solve it politically. If it's a legal problem, you use the law. If it's an economic problem, you change economic policy. So there is no shortcut. My second recommendation is that you have to deal with the question of the electoral system. I think Francis talked about it. A rigged political system will produce a bus-pack parliament. There is no shortcut. And therefore, this parliament, if you cannot help this country change our electoral system, strengthen the safeguards of the system, and do it purposefully and business-like, because in most cases, these things, because there are political interests at play, we do them, because we are just taking care of the interests. And thirdly, we have to be bold enough and deconcentrate and decentralize power from Kampala. Everybody wants to come to Kampala. We have to be bold and give power to the regions and make sure that these people who want to run to Kampala, and we can even put money there for people to be governors and whatever, they can remain there. Everybody right now is fighting to come to Kampala, to come to the bus park. And I hope that we can be able to change that and deal with it. Thank you very much for listening to me.
So, Right Honorable Deputy Speaker, have you been disappointed or Godba has served to vindicate your earlier worries? That's a question I am sure he will respond to. Godba decides, and aptly so, to harp on the issue of the bus park. He makes his 3 recommendations, and one of them is that you must reduce the size of parliament if you must have your quality and perception improve. Those of us who couldn't win an election, even if there were 1,000 constituencies, if they make them 2,000, they increase our chances. So, we're looking forward to being in the chambers. Did you also say that Parliament maybe needs to employ a lot and very formidable PR to change its image? Well, have you bothered to ask why I'm moderating this program? Therein perhaps lies the answer. But let's conclude by looking at the bus park. At least we are glad it was not referred to as a taxi park. The taxi park is like the bus park, only that here you have smaller vehicles. I'm sure many of you who have come to Kampala have been to a place called Platinum House. If you haven't, you know where Platinum House is? Overlooking the old park. When you stand at Platinum House, what you see down there is chaos. Terrible chaos. Because it's the taxi park. But to its credit, Right Honorable Speaker, and maybe this is where the PR comes in, the moment you enter the taxi park, you'll be amazed by the kind of order that there is. Every taxi there knows when it's going to exit. No one ever crashes himself in there. Many of you drive these big cars here in Kampala. If they park the Mercedes-Benz G55 in the taxi park and dared you to drive it out without a scratch, and if you manage to exit without a scratch, you own it. Many of you would never own that Benz. But the characters there know how to wiggle their way through. They have their order, and they deliver their passengers, and we are all very happy we go to that taxi park. So, Right Honorable Speaker, to your credit, this may be a bus park, but you never crash each other. Oh, you never crash each other? Okay. You get knocked by other things. You wiggle through this. You do things in your way. Those who think you were a disorganized entity are those who are standing at Platinum House, where Godba was standing over there, looking at the bus park over there and calling it chaos. So Godba and your dear president, you come into the taxi park or the bus park, you realize that there is incredible order. We know which bus is exiting, which bus parks where. We know the Busabara stage, even without a signpost, by the way. We know the Namugongo stage, and everything is in order. But that said, now, the floor is open.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I am somewhat caught in the middle, partly on the receiving end, and also a bit on the outside. I also intently listened to the President's speeches. And on this particular issue, as far as allocation of resources, I agree with him. Having the experience of being in this Parliament, and a lot of the blame falling on Parliament for not dealing with critical issues, a lot of it comes from the executive. And it should be the executive to tackle some of the serious challenges we face. On the question of whether the voice of the citizens is heard, I'll tell you definitely yes. I think possibly about 70 to 80% of members of the 10th Parliament have bought ambulances and donated to their constituencies. In other words, they have heard the people in their constituencies crying about health delivery. But rather than addressing it on the floor of Parliament in a systematically organized fashion which is sustainable, we as members of Parliament look for means of how to ease or push the matter further forward. You don't control the resources. And it's part of the reason why members of Parliament will be fighting for more resources to try and ease pressure on themselves. So in many ways, we're caught in a vicious cycle. But we need to come to a point where there's a reset button and we rationally deal with these problems. Many of my colleagues over the next 2 weeks, their phones will not be on. February, when children are going back to school, you will feel the pressure of your members, of your constituency, struggling to educate their children. They don't want the children to be part of the 1 million who disappear. They want to get the best opportunity to educate the children. Our PLE results have shown a great discrepancy between urban and rural. It is something we need to look in, but one thing which I know, representing an urban constituency, there is a small amount of fees to be paid in the UP schools. But as this parliament, we have to, not this particular parliament, but as Uganda, we have to address this issue. The elephant in the room is that we have a presidency which has dominated all aspects of governance. Be it in political parties, be it in parliament. Recently with the issues in parliament, I cried. I think at this point, let me end here and allow my senior brother.
What is to assess? It means to determine the importance or value of something. What is to evaluate? It means to determine or judge the significance, value or worth, or even the condition or state of something in a careful and thoughtful manner. And that's precisely what I'm going to do. Carefully and thoughtfully. At the other end of every exam and in the possession of the examiner is something called the marking scheme. Fortunately for us, the Parliament itself has provided a marking scheme stating their roles and therefore the basis of our assessment and evaluation. One, these are now subjects. Legislation. The question is, to what extent has Parliament debated and passed laws through which the institutions of government endeavor to guide the country's program and progress? My advice to the organizers of this session is to do a quick opinion poll, to give us a ballot paper, and on each of these questions, we put a scale of 1 to 10, and thereafter, the results should be announced by the speaker. That would be very useful. 2, representation. To what extent has Parliament represented their constituents' views? 3, oversight. To what extent has Parliament tackled corruption, violations of rule of law, and other unlawful activities? 4, budget approval and appropriation. To what extent has Parliament analyzed and approved the national budget and generally provided responsible stewardship over our public funds? And then the last subject, you can call it a subsidiary if you wish, constituency. To what extent does Parliament keep its fingers on the pulse of the population to meet their constituents, give feedback on their work and government policies, and also get views and concerns on issues of importance to the constituents? These are my brief assessments. They are very general because there is no time. I hope next time I will qualify to be a panelist. At the start of the 10th Parliament, the winner, in quotes, of the presidential elections announced his willingness to engage his opponents in a process of dialogue. That stance was an improvement on an earlier outburst where the president, devoid of any magnanimity towards his opponents, declared that his objective is to annihilate the opposition. We assume that Parliament is a place where there is a conversation going on. This statement by the president means that he prefers a monologue to a dialogue. Over time, he has continued to say the same thing. The latest statement was when he declared that the opposition is dead in Uganda. In making my short remarks, I'll make no effort at flattery. I'll not embellish or sugarcoat the pain out there among the people concerning the manner in which the 10th Parliament conducted itself during the debate on the constitutional amendment, whose centerpiece was the removal of the presidential term limits. Let me say it plainly. There is a civil war between the people and the 10th Parliament, especially the members who voted to remove the presidential age limits. I'm normally calm, measured, and restrained when responding to the issues that continue to polarize our country. But we all have a boiling point. Ugandans have reached their boiling point. Even Jesus Christ, our Lord, the Prince of Peace, reached his boiling point when, as reported in Matthew 21, verses 12 to 13, he heard that traders and money changers had taken over the temple. St. Matthew reports, and I quote, "And Jesus entered the temple and drove out all who sold and bought in the temple. And he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold pigeons. He said to them, 'It is written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you make it a den of robbers.'" Mr. Speaker, in the London Underground, when you take a train and the train stops to allow passengers to alight or board, you'll hear a voice on the station public address system saying, "Mind the gap. Mind the gap." The gap they're talking about is the gap between the door of the train and the station platform. Now, the train moves, but the station platform goes nowhere. But an accident can occur if you ignore the gap. That's why the speaker talked of the attrition rate. Those are the people who did not mind the gap. They fell through. The train is the parliament. It is an institution which we have come to honor by our presence here. We are not here to honor the passengers. We are honoring the train. There is a turnover at every election cycle. The station platform is the people, us, who vote and service the train through our taxes. The people go nowhere. They are there to stay. The passengers are the parliamentarians. It is very risky for the passengers not to mind the gap as they did in the last debate on the constitutional amendment. So my final word, mind the gap. Thank you very much.
So Professor Mwambusi Andebesa.
Parliament conspired with the executive to extend its term of office. It was ending in 67. They arbitrarily extended it for another 5 years up to 1971 without consulting the people. That is the history of the Parliament of Uganda. In 2017, they conspired with the executive to extend their term of office and the age limit of the president. That is the Parliament of Uganda. I would not want to go to many of those.
Members of Parliament are always trying to be politically correct by the world over, and therefore avoid the voices of the people. I was reading somewhere that actually minority parties in some countries like USA, like the Communist Party, which does not even go to Parliament, has more influence in shaping the developments in their country more than those who are in Parliament or Congress, because there is this new culture of being politically correct, and it has become a virus. Almost all parliaments all over the world, and hence parliamentary democracy crisis all over the world. 3, we are supposed to participate in parliamentary affairs to shape issues as citizens. And indeed, Parliament, one time or the other, has invited us to participate. Like now, there are parliamentary committees. They are debating the budget process. They are participating in the budget process. The other day, even I was invited to participate in the Legal and Parliamentary Affairs Committee on the question of Magezi Bill. The issue is not participation. but the nature of participation. And some people call it being participated. You might think you are participating when actually they are participating you. And I told the parliamentary committee there that actually I know you are participating in me, but nevertheless, let me give my voice. So when you people are participating, know that you may be participated. Even when we are here, we could be being participated so that we legitimize the system. Next time you are participating with politicians, be mindful that you might be participated. Some time back when they were debating the not political order, it was parliamentary bill. We participated, me and my colleagues. By then we had an organization called the Free Movement. Before the parliamentary committee, Honorable Olanya might be remembering, we were participated. I remember we were talking about the question of whether a party would be allowed to talk in the society or whatever, and then they had put in the draft today that we were debating that a political party would only remain at its headquarters. And just in the talking, just casually, we reminded them, but by their headquarters can be everywhere, and therefore parties will be talking in all districts, because as long as it is in Uganda. These fellows, I saw them writing down notes. You know what came out of the last report? A political party will have headquarters, and headquarters must be only in Kampala. You know what that meant? We are the ones who opened up their mind that a political party can now be everywhere and start talking. In that case, we were participated. Ask Professor Sempebwa. He went to this legal parliamentary committee, and he just, by the way, talked about term limits, I think, of the president, or something like that, yeah? In passing. They used it in the report, that even Professor Sempebwa asked that we talk about term limits, and we returned them. He was being participated. Be careful about participation. The nature of participation is very important. Lastly, I want to talk about citizen space. Somebody talked about the question of, since the parliament, the 6th parliament, we've been having reviews of the constitution and amendments which have provided for the expansion of the space of the state. On the other hand, on the opposite side, these bills have actually been narrowing the space of citizens. Parliament has been narrowing the citizens' space, public space I'm talking about. And therefore, in that regard, we are saying that Parliament should rethink its stand and ensure that next time you pass the laws that also expand political space. Those which have narrowed political space, I can mention them. Political Order Management Act, the Media Act, the Civil Society or NGOs Act. Now of late, we have got this misuse of computer space or something like that. And it is catching everybody, you and me, and everybody, and we are narrowing the space. Instead, the state space is being expanded, including even going into the archives and bringing back certain obnoxious laws and applying them in the 21st century. The latest I know of is annoying the president. It is illegal in Uganda. Actually, it is treasonable to annoy the president. If you are elected and the president, for some reason, God forbid, I'm not saying that he would do that, and he wanted to have an affair with you, and you refused, you will be accused of treason because you have annoyed the president. These are colonial and UPC laws made in 1960s, which the government has gone back to bring back. This is the parliament we are talking about. We need to revisit the history of parliament and make sure that the voice of the people is heard, or else we are not talking about the democracy, we are talking about some other animal. I beg to sit down. Thank you very much.
mukuliko omwaka mwenna. Nze Ssaalongo Wasswa Kasozi Kawempe Division chairman w'abakadde mu Kawempe Kakungulu zone. N'olwekyo mwogedde ebintu bingi nnyo. Ndi musajja mukulu mpeze emyaka 83. Twazze kubaganya ano birowoozo. Ekikulu ekiriwo Uganda yaffe yalimu abazungu balina amateeka. Naye bwe munaaba temunakola amateeka ensi eyonoonese eweddewo. Amateeka ge gafuga byonna. Ge gafuga enguzi, ge gafuga emirimu, ge gafuga buli kintu kyonna ekibeerawo. Ekyokubiri ekinyiiza ennyo, mu nsi yaffe temwalimu balwanirizi ba ddembe, wabula abantu beerwanangako ku ddembe lyabwe. Pulezidenti bwe yaleeta emirembe teyaleeta kwonoona ggwanga. Kati nze siyinza kujjamu wano kooti nezija nkunkumulaawo. Eddembe lyammwe mba ndyonoonye n'eryange mba ndyonoonye. Naye muzzeewo amateeka, buli muntu atambulire ku mateeka, kubanga kati nkyewuunya abalamuzi tebaliiwo, poliisi teriiwo, ne bapulida tebaliiwo. Kwegamba tuli awo ng'abantu abazannya obuzannyi mu kisero, naye amateeka bwe gabula mu ggwanga teriba ggwanga. Sipiika, njagala ntegeere ekintu kino kye nkugamba nti ekintu kino kikulu nnyo. Neewuunya bwewuunya omuntu okumukwata ng'assa abaana oba assa omwana, kyokka ne mugamba waddembe okusaba okweyimirirwa. Mu mateeka gennyini nze gemmanyi ng'omusajja omukulu, omuntu aleepinze omwana oba assa omuntu teyeeyimirirwa okujjako abbya enkoko, yeyeeyimirirwa. Naye ne muleeta ekintu ekibi ennyo, waddembe okweyimirirwa, ne muleeta Basumani Lwaiti. Basumani Lwaiti kitegeeza ki? Sipiika, nze nja kujjeewo nzibe ebintu byo, nziruke bagamba omusajja muzeeyi yazze wano nabba ebintu. Naye muzeeyi oyo bagamba nti ali Kawempe, bajje bannoonyereze ng'ebintu nabikwese. Mundera bulezi ndyoke enjogera ebintu byo oba munkuba. Bannange njagala mbabuulire, ekikulu kye muyina mwenna tuli baddugavu ffenna. Saagala kugamba nti kubanga omuntu ne bw'oba ng'olina amaka ng'olina abaana bo 5 baalidde enva, ffe twalyanga enva ne batukwata ne batukuba, naye taata waffe teyamalanga n'agamba nti baana bange nabakubidde bwereere. Ekirala, poliisi neekwata omuntu ate neemwegayirira mbu nakoze nsonyiwa nakukwatidde bwereere, eyo teba poliisi. Kaŋŋambe nenya Mwami Katumba Wamala ow'ekitiibwa yagenda aba opposition ne balwanira mu lukiiko, ekitabangawo kyaliwo. Naye Katumba Yamala olw'okuba yali mukulu n'agamba omusajja ono ng'ayitiridde ku banne abakuba obutebe akola ki, kanange mukube. Naye Mwami Katumba tewandyetondedde muntu oyo kubanga tewamulumba wakaawe. Wamulumba yakola ekisobyo ekyawalirizibwa gwe olyoka okikole, era serwakyo wakikola olwo wandifuddewo omuntu. N'olwekyo njagala abakulu mwenna nga bwe muli, ekindeese mu dipeedi eno guno mulundi gwa 2 ne ku mwaka 2021, naye njagala muzzeewo ekintu ekintu era kyensimbyeko essira ge mateeka. Pulezidenti yagamba nti omuntu akutte omwana omuto nassa omuntu bamutwale luzira bamusibeyo emyezi 6 nga bwe babuuliriza. Kano Besigye yagaana n'enseeko n'opozisoni yonna. N'olwekyo abo be baekera abatayagala ggwanga kubeera bulungi. N'olwekyo nze ŋŋenda mbasabye ng'angenda okumaliriza.
Omukulu Sipiika akitegedde Bulindaala
abeere nammwe naye mukole ebintu ebirungi ebyeyambisa mu ggwanga. Ffe abantu ba wansi mututunuulire, tujje tubabuulire ensobi eriwo. Nze nawandikira Oweekitiibwa Kadaga n'ebbaluwa gyeri mu ofiisi ye, akabaluwa kano omwami ono yeyasindika olwakadaaga yalimu ofiisi ya mukyala Kadaaga naye kasooka ntambula siraba mukyala Kadaaga. Ekyokubiri, waliwo ebintu ebyajja nga ne biwandiikako ebbaluwa nga mulabula ate mu kiseera ekyo ebintu ebyo byakobawo ku luuyi olwe. N'olwekyo nina n'ebbaluwa endala gye nawandiise. Mututunuulire nnyo mu abantu ba wansi okusinga abo abakulu emukuluminga. Sigadde Ndisalongo Waswa Kasozi.
Civil society structure that was once created, that was providing a formal engagement, that even when there is a decision to be made, you are bound to go back to that structure and say, what do the civil society have to say? When do you make a choice to agree with the Geneva report and throw out another report around another process? So for me, I think this is going to remain an event, a chat room, unless we institutionalize our relationship and then we are able to hold each other accountable and have an engagement plan that we are going to follow. And we do not only come here to evaluate how well Parliament has been the voice of the people, but how well we are engaging and making sure that the voices of the people are heard. Because we always claim, and actually we are not claiming, it is the truth, civil society also is the voice of the people. So I'm requesting, not demanding, that we revisit what we had thought about, I think it was around the 9th Parliament. The formal structure for Parliament's engagement with the civil society, and it becomes mandatory, and we agree on the actions that we have taken, then we come here at such a moment and do mutual accountability. I submit, Right Honorable Speaker.
Thank you very much. Now I can see the conversation is getting closer to discussing more serious issues than politics.
When they do come to Kampala, the picture they initially came with ceases to be. Are they our representatives? And at one point, well, we've been told in different perspectives that at the end of the day, after realizing that they no longer fit with those they represent, so they have to be part of where they feel that they look like. So they remain in Kampala. The issue comes up that we need to ascertain the quality of the voice. As we're talking about the voice of the people, what do the people down there call the quality of the voice of the people? Are we really getting the right picture from the ground? All these people whom we sent have taken out another degree, and they are some kind of bourgeoisie group which no longer fit with the people they represent. Thank you.
Thank you, Murangira.
Until we interrogate the context within which we live and also look at where we're going as a country, the way this parliament operates along all the functions of legislation, appropriation, oversight, are all influenced by who we are and where we're coming from. There's one fundamental question that as a country we need to address ourselves to. Are we a democracy? Or are we seeking to be a democracy? How far are we from this democracy? We have one fundamental constant in this country, and that is President Museveni. Everything rotates around the person of the president. So whatever we do, we must take cognizance of the fact that President Museveni is part of this fundamental problem. And if we are looking at reflecting the voice of the people, we must understand how to deal with this fundamental issue called President Museveni. This is my suggestion. Instead of looking for the next election, instead of looking at the next appropriation, instead of looking at the next oversight function of Parliament. We need all of us collectively, the ruling party, civil society, the opposition, President Museveni at the center of it all, to have a very candid conversation about the future of this country. We need to remove the fear from the equation that President Museveni might be having, that after power, where does he go? That's very, very candid. Because he has a personal army. He does not need you. That's why he calls you a bastard, in order to be in power. But he's also fearful of life after power. Where do you want him to go? We need to address that very candidly, and perhaps he will start thinking that perhaps there's going to be a home in Uganda after power. And that is how everything else, I'll tell you, will fall in line. You will start having representatives, you will start having leaders rather than dealers, you will start having a clear appropriation of the budget going to key sectors of the economy. You will have sorted everything else. We need to deal with the future of this country collectively, and we need to deal with the person of President Museveni.
Just before you leave, let me ask, I always hear these submissions. We need to have a candid discussion.
Bold conversation.
Yes, bold conversation, candid conversation, President Museveni and everyone. Paint for me a picture. Where would this conversation, how would it take place? Because normally if you invite President Museveni in this room, for example, how does it be? I mean, break it down. Maybe I am too down there to appreciate what you mean by let's have this conversation.
I'm telling you that there are some forces that have to be equal. I'll tell you that you only bargain from a point of strength. So as long as the situation is as is, it is not going to be very easy for those who are in power to think it is time to negotiate. It is going to be very important for those who have the power right now to also believe that in a democracy, it should mean more than 3 wolves and a sheep deciding what should be had for supper.
Mr. Speaker,
that means...
Our question was, how?
That means that above the power that we have as a nation, and those who have the power in control, should start understanding that this power is not as big as the country called Uganda. And that the future of this country is going to outlive the tenure of a given regime. And that we need to take all of this for us in stride if we have to live beyond for our children and our children's children.
So you agree with Chairman Mao, therefore, that we all need to appreciate that there's a platform, there is a gap, we need to mind the gap, there are passengers, there is a train.
Very, very important.
Thank you very much. Now the lady right next to you.
Last year, we went to Argentina, Buenos Aires. There was a WTO meeting, ministerial meeting, very, very important. There was no single member of parliament there. And most of the government officials who were there were paid for by the European Union. Yet these are the people we are negotiating with. So, Chair, recently also under AGOA, Americans gave us AGOA, but recently they were telling us when we wanted to increase the tariffs on second-hand clothes, they said no, you are not going to increase tariffs on second-hand clothes. Yet we are saying we want to add value to our cotton. So, Chair, the way you look at it, there is a dichotomy between what we want our economy to look like and the policies we put in place and the agreements we sign. And what I'm calling upon Parliament is to discuss more issues of the economy and also to discuss in Parliament all the agreements we do sign. Another request is on the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives. That ministry, we are giving it 0.4%, 92 billion only. And this is a ministry which has Uganda National Bureau of Standards. Today we are talking about the meat that you have to look at, the meat which has flies. That's the meat which you have to buy. These are standards. We can't even trade when our standards are so poor. This ministry also houses the Uganda Export Promotion Board. We need to export. Any country which doesn't trade can't have an income. This ministry also houses the industrial research. We need to industrialize. In fact, the theme of this year is industrialization for prosperity and for shared prosperity. So, Chair, again, we need to make sure that in fact, you asked Honorable Deputy Speaker, where should we put our money? We need to invest more money in trade, because also trade and industry has the backward and forward linkage between agriculture and industry and trade. There are issues, members of parliament who are here, issues like a minimum price for products. Today, in some areas, maize goes at 300 a kilo, 300, and we are talking about alleviating poverty. For me, I think if we are to link parliament to the people, we need to discuss these issues. We need to address the issues which are affecting our people. I could go on and on about the state of the economy, but I will stop there. What I'm just requesting for that parliament, I know politics is very important also, but also the economy is very important, because hungry people are very angry people. Thank you so much.
Honorable Speaker, Honorable Deputy Speaker of Parliament, our moderator today, my fellow civil society leaders, leaders of political parties and MPs around, and the public. My name is Kasivante Joseph. I'm the chair-president of National Taxpayers Protection Organization. Now I will be very brief because I've been given 1 minute. I hope I will be able to put my message across. Why Uganda, like other African countries, the political and the constitutional instability is historical. You don't know where it started. It started in Ghana with Kwame Nkrumah. On the eve of independence of Ghana, Nkrumah said, that is in 1957. He said to the political elites of Africa who are aspiring to be presidents, he told them, seek ye political kingdom, all the rest shall be added unto you. And this is the greed in politics. You find our honorable members of parliament, they come with an intention of enriching themselves. Say, mostly like a taxpayers protection organization, we were very annoyed with the income tax amendment bill 2016, which ring-fenced the income of MPs. That was very selfish. That is really tax avoidance, using a law to avoid tax. And you are turning parliament into a group of Pharisees and their scribes who load big loads on their subjects which they cannot carry. They say, do what I tell you, but don't do what I do. That is very selfish. That is very selfish. Now, how can we end this political instability? Like my president here of members of, public, is it parliament? Public parliament? Gentlemen, yeah. Yeah. He said President Museveni is not maybe confident where he's going. Where is he going after power? But me, I'm of the view that we put a term limit, a mandatory term limit to all serving MPs from LS1 to president. 2 years, 2-term limit, 5 years. 5 years, that is 10 years. Everybody will sweep. We get other people. We have got resources here. Uganda is not thirsty of resources, or is not lacking resources, political resources. People here, so many people are in the back bench, are in the localities. They are able to serve as good parliamentarians. So we want to give everybody a chance to serve as a leader. So you serve for 2 terms, 5 years term limit, you go, whether you are an IDC1 or a president. The president will be sure is going with all the people, and he will say, I'm also safe. Other than, why do we say only the president should go? Term limit for the president. Term limit is mandatory for all elected officials, so that we can have peace. They go, we clean the house, we put in new furniture, we put in new people, we put in new brain. That will lead us somewhere. We are tired of all the logs coming back with the same fightings. That must be ended. I will conclude this.
But your time seems to have expired.
Okay, maybe next time. Thank you. And this theme should change, by the way. This is, now at the moment, it's Parliament, it's the voice of the few privileged politicians who are able to be elected. It's not Parliament, the voice of the people. Parliament for the selfish politicians who are able to be elected. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Right Honorable the Deputy Speaker, distinguished members here present. My names are Dr. John Senkumba Sewanyana, and I'm a development and business consultant. I'm engaged in development. And development involves politics and other aspects of human nature. What I've come to discover in my interactive missions with stakeholders, I have been an active person since and before independence. I have followed what has happened to this country, and I've seen a conspiracy, as Professor there said. The conspiracy of the elite, the conspiracy of the educated, and the conspiracy of politicians who are manipulators of the people. We have, the tragedy this country faces is lack of patriotism, lack of people who are really interested in the development of this country. And for this, I have gone around, and I would like to thank Parliamentary Administration and Parliamentary Commission for organizing such a forum. But I would emphasize that this forum should not be organized for cosmetic and interests of a few. This should be a forum that should be organized for the development of this country. Because since NRM came to power, the first 15 years of NRM were really developmental. And the statistics show. Today, NRM is unveiled. He has talked of a dictatorship. And for him, he sees that President Museveni is a problem. President Museveni is a problem because all of us here have participated and have conspired to put him in power and cover him. Semogere participated. Akena there is participating. All of us are participating, including the religious leaders who are every now and again given vehicles. And they don't come up to speak the real truth that can salvage this country. Today, when we come in a forum like this, Madam Winnie Chiza, the leader of opposition, you have done your role. You have promoted the women's cause. But the Speaker of Parliament, Honorable Right, Honorable Deputy Speaker, Parliament is the special organ vested with power to govern this country. And the Speaker of Parliament is the leader of this country. because he directs the board of governors for this country, which is Parliament. We are surprised with what is happening. We are really surprised with what is happening because no body has stood the test of time. Right Honorable Kadaga had stood with the rebel MP and she kept them in Parliament. That scored credit for her. Why didn't she stand firm for this opportunistic legislation that was brought in to change age limit? Parliament is claiming responsibility, but who gave you the power other than the people? You are saying that Parliament is the voice of the people. How did the members of Parliament give themselves the power to change the agreement made with the people that they sure to govern us, to lead us for 5 years, and they changed it to 7 years? They are now conspiring again to bring in a referendum for the president who has sworn to govern people for 5 years. Parliament, therefore, has become an appendage of the executive. And we are seeing that also the judiciary, which is another arm of government, is being, we don't know what will happen. Honorable Chiza, you have taken your cases there. Please pursue them, and we test Parliament, we test the judiciary. Time is very short, and I suggest that such a forum should always be given time. Because if you want to hear the views, I interact with people. I'm a development and business consultant. I'm in development, and development is part of politics. It's the politics of this country that has misled the country. President Museveni used to say it, but I don't know how he has diverted from that statement. Politics is the science of management of society, but people have made it negative. We look at the opposition as an enemy of this country, yet the opposition is an official area that should check the government. We should change the attitude of those in power. Those who are in power should know that this country belongs to the people and that the people have authority.
We need to give you a big hand clap. I think my initial remarks, I made some predictions that if we were to take statistics at the end of this debate, I'll be exonerated. And I can tell you that from my assessment, and I've listened, 2 people spoke to this parliament. Only 2 people spoke to this parliament. The rest had their own grievances that they wanted to air out, and this could not be a better opportunity for them to do so. You see, when there are no opportunities, people use any that they get to say anything that they had been dying to say for a long time. That's why these days when you go to Bari, those who have not spoken for long choose burial grounds to be political areas of speech, which is unfortunate. The 2 people who spoke to me, directing my action, the lady from Satini, an organization set up by Yash Tandon, I have interacted with them, and they spoke to me. Why do I say so? This parliament handles 17 sectors of government. 17 sectors of government. And the sectoral committees responsible for these sectors. That's exactly what they're doing now. And that's why the timing of this particular meeting is put at this time, so that we could, in a way, bite in what is going in Parliament and also give inputs. she didn't have sufficient time to enumerate her concerns about the 16 sectors that are supposed to be the engine of growth in this country. But thank you for rising to the occasion. The rest restricted themselves to one sector, that's the jail law sector, justice law and order sector of this government, which is a good thing. But unfortunately, it's only one sector. That's where the politics is, that's where the police is, that's where the prisons are, that's where all these things happen. It's one sector of governance. Very important indeed, yes, but unfortunately, it is only one sector. So we need to inform this parliament. So I am going to suggest for the next meeting, for next parliament week, that we invite farmers, industrialists, contractors, exporters, importers, rather than this breed of people who have been able to invite this team, who have been very eloquent in the presentation they have made, except they have not assisted this parliament. And that's my disappointment. Just like you are disappointed in parliament, I am more disappointed in you. And you see, in this country, if you want to get an applause, just be trivial. When you are trivial, you attract an applause. And that has been demonstrated here. Those who made the trivialist point became the most popular. And that is the sad thing about this country. And that's the sad thing about the world. It reminded me of two statements by two professors, which are very offensive, but I like quoting them. One is called Charles Bukowski, an American writer, poet. He wrote at a time when Los Angeles was in issues. And he said, the problem with the world is that the intelligent people are so full of doubts, while the stupid ones are full of confidence. The burden of all of us is how do we shift it and make the intelligent people take charge of the affairs of state. So the things they like saying from the outside, not influencing much, but they're loud about it, can be said at the places where these decisions are made. Don't shy away from these things. Come, be members of parliament. And say those things in this parliament, because this is where it matters. This is where the mistakes you are talking about are made. Come, be part of this. Change it. We are tired of these armchair people who are so good at criticisms, so good at pointing fingers, except at taking an assessment of what they have been able to contribute positively towards shaping what should go into the management of this country. It is so easy to criticize. But the people whose feet are in the hot water know exactly what it means to take some of the decisions that they take. So I'm inviting all of you to pick up nomination forms, come next elections and show up here so that we are in charge of governance and we stop this blame game. For example, my name is Jacob Olanya. I know who I am. If you call me a fool, why should I make that a subject of my debate for the whole day? I know who I am. I know what parliament is. Why should I make it a subject of debate of what somebody called parliament? Why? Parliament is created by the Constitution. Its responsibilities, mandates, and powers are in the Constitution. If somebody should say, probably as a by the way in a rally or something, that parliament is a bus, why should I make that the subject of my presentation? Does it change what parliament is? Does it? It does not. It doesn't.